Fascinating to hear and something to learn from.
I've never felt threatened by Jesus. Muslims are taught that he is one of the most important prophets, immaculately conceived by the Virgin Mary. Priscilla had different feelings about Jesus, and they weren't good ones. I couldn't believe that she had once taken down the crucifix in a hotel room. I think Priscilla is hardwired to stay alert to anti-Semitism. She is constantly vigilant. I can understand how Suzanne felt entitled to tell her uncensored story of Jesus' life and death without fear of being labeled an anti-Semite. I know this feeling well. I fear being labeled an anti-Semite whenever I am critical of Israel.
Another confrontation was about to begin. Suzanne's Episcopal Church had been meeting temporarily at a temple. Her true feelings surfaced when Priscilla began to question her response to her children.
You know, Suzanne, I read what you wrote last week about the temple. You wrote that when your children called out, "That's our temple, Mommy," you didn't explain exactly what you felt when you passed the temple.
To tell you the truth, I'm not sure I knew exactly what I felt.
But do you now?
I think I don't want to be identified as being the stereotype of a Jew.
There you go. So what is the stereotype?
Well,
What would be so bad about being mistaken for a Jew?
I'm not sure.
If my children said, "There's our church," I would say, "No, honey, we're not Christians, we're Jews." But you felt something beyond that. What was it?
I don't know how to express it.
Look, relax, Suzanne. I don't think you're anti-Semitic. But if I'm going to be honest, you need to be honest. Right here and right now.
I thought it was enough that I had confessed my experience, but she needed more.
She wouldn't want to be a Muslim either.
So what's the stereotype, Suzanne?
Well, you know I have Jewish friends too, Priscilla.
Yeah, some of my best friends are Jewish. Ha ha ha. So what's the stereotype?
All right. I guess it's someone who's pushy and, well, someone who cares very much about money. And then there's the Woody Allen neuroticism.
Suzanne, 2 out of those 3 things justified the Holocaust. So I rest my case.
What case?
I rest my case as to why Jews carry the Holocaust around with them, why we are sometimes accused of being so obsessed with it. Because even enlightened, intelligent, kind Christian people such as you can sit here and verbalize the stereotype of a Jew as a pushy person who is obsessed with money.
That stereotype is multiplied by 100 for a Muslim today.
Okay, Rania, but we're not talking about you right now. Look, Suzanne, they are the same words Hitler used. Pushy, aggressive, consumed with money. It all goes back to the money changes at the temple.
Maybe this illustrates the difference between Christianity and Judaism. In Christianity, there's a prejudice against wealth and materialism. Jesus had said that it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. There is another passage in which a wealthy man who follows all the commandments asks Jesus what else he can do, and Jesus tells him, "Leave all your goods behind and follow me."
Well, I guess corrupt CEOs like Ken Lay must have missed those sermons. Look, listen, I can't quote scripture off the top of my head. Maybe Christians did have more guidance on the subject of materialism in the New Testament. But I can assure you that nowhere in the Torah does it say accumulate as much money as you can and screw your investors. I was raised by my parents to be very generous to those less fortunate than we were. And I have taught my children to do the same. You know, whenever there's a scandal on Wall Street, we Jews say, please, God, don't let it be a Jew. We're paranoid about the stereotype of Jews obsessed about accumulating money. The fact that you know stereotypes exist doesn't make you bad, Suzanne, but you were embarrassed to say them. And those Jewish friends, who are they?
I knew lots of Jewish people. I lived in New York, after all. I grew up in a neighborhood with 3 or 4 Orthodox families on the block. I swam, I played softball, I took ballet classes, including, but they weren't really friends. Why? In part because people, including me, gravitated towards others like ourselves. They're easier to understand.
They had survived another amazing confrontation and they were exhausted. Rania was now ready to talk.
I know, Priscilla, that you are not interested in my point of view, but I feel like I'm fighting stereotypes every day. A mother hosting my daughter on a play date asked if Layla had any dietary restrictions. Another acquaintance recently asked to see my sister's wedding pictures. She thought she would be wearing ethnic regalia, but in fact, even my grandmother wore a white dress to her wedding.
Really?
When I meet someone new, I often feel I have to immediately sound smart and educated. That is one of the reasons I was a student forever.
Is that the stereotype, that Islamic women are not educated?
Yes, that they don't go to school, that they don't know the worth of money, they buy 100 of the same dress and the same color, they are repressed by their husbands, covered up and controlled.
But that is such a stereotype. You're nothing like that.
Yes, but sometimes, Priscilla, I wonder if you like me because I defy the stereotype, or you like me for who I am.
So you're saying that I stereotype Muslim women?
I don't think Suzanne would like to be a Muslim woman either, would you, Suzanne?
No, especially after 9/11, it would be very uncomfortable. I think that before 9/11, Islam wasn't on the radar screen of most Americans. No offense, Rania, but you are flattering yourself to think there was a stereotype of a Muslim.
That was the last straw for me. Talk about being banished. I had been sitting there patiently struggling to make my voice heard, as Suzanne and Priscilla went at it in their so-called salient moment of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Forget Judeo-Christian Muslim tradition. I could not even get my stereotypes recognized. There were no Muslim stereotypes? You're kidding. What about the hijacking in the 80s, Pan Am Lockerbie? When Americans think of Islam, they think of terrorism, fanatics, abused women, spoiled rich Arabs, a religion of the sword spread by the sword.
When those planes hit the World Trade Center, the thought of Islam never entered my mind.
It did mine.
I think prior to 9/11, people didn't think even much about Muslims.
No. What about the images of fat oil sheiks with camels and harems spending lots of money?
Rania, I think you are hypersensitive to your own stereotype. Some would say you are a self-hating Muslim. People sometimes accuse me of being a self-hating Jew.
I strongly disagree. To be critical of a stereotype or aware of it is not to be self-hating. No matter where we go or who we become, we are still carpet sellers, out to swindle innocent non-Muslims. Most people don't associate Islam with positive scientific or cultural world contributions like Europe's Renaissance.
What do you mean?
Well, it was the Muslims who translated and preserved the Greek classics. Europe was reintroduced to these texts by Muslims. Muslims were great mathematicians. Few people know that algebra comes from the Arabic word al-jabar. And the maps and boats that were used to discover America were Muslim.
So let me get this straight. Christopher Columbus used the inventions of the Islamic community to discover America?
Absolutely. Ferdinand and Isabella used the know-how of centuries of Muslims, the inventors who had been there well before them. I think Muslims and Arabs are now the only groups in our society about whom other people think they can make racial slurs and jokes without being labeled racists.
Rania, remember when I invited you to join our book club discussion on the Middle East?
Yes.
Well, I never told you that the Jewish woman who was scheduled to host that evening bowed out after she heard you were coming.
You've got to be kidding. Why didn't you tell me this before?
I really didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable.
Can you imagine if you replaced Palestinian Muslim with African American or Asian? I dislike stereotypes so much. That's why I want to be empowered. That is what this project is about for me. Not about me belonging, but me saying I am proud of who I am. And I refuse to be plugged into a stereotype. Now I want my voice to be heard.
Speak up.
Okay.
As a Muslim, Priscilla, we feel that we are victims now.
Okay, I'll give that to you. You can be a victim.
People may have difficulty thinking about Muslims as victims because now there are so many aggressors using the name of your religion.
I sensed how difficult my audience was going to be. I clearly had a lot of ground to cover. Muslims feel that in the West, Islam is being seen as an inherently violent religion that was unapologetically spread by the sword. Westerners seem to believe that Islam is inferior as a religion when they compare it to the message of Jesus Christ. Some in the West consider the modern violence committed in the name of Islam to be a modern manifestation of that religion and consider him an epileptic and dismiss his visions. Others consider him a madman. Some Westerners consider Islam's holy scriptures to be plagiarized versions of Christian and Jewish texts and consider Muslims barbaric, uncivilized, extreme, and unenlightened. Clearly, a few stereotypes will have to be shed before people can even begin to imagine talking about shared Judeo-Christian Muslim tradition.
I feel personally I am not the stereotype.
The overriding culture we are in is Christian. The whole world operates on a Christian calendar. We learn about Christians through osmosis. But what do they learn about us?
I agree. But why are you holding that against me?
Rania and I understand each other because we're minorities. Right, Rania?
Explain the kinship you have, the things that you feel that I don't, that make you different.
I think it's like a schoolyard where there are social outcasts. Then there's the popular crowd. The Christians are the popular crowd, and you're one of them.
Priscilla, do you feel like you can't connect with me because I'm part of a majority?
You wouldn't understand.
How do you know that?
You're right. That's discrimination on my part.
Suzanne shared the times in her life when she had felt an outsider, feeling insecure and inferior to others. This was a side of her that the others hadn't seen. She had always seemed so confident.
I never thought of you as an outsider.
Well, I was, or I am sometimes. Even though I'm a Christian, I can connect with your feelings as a minority. But I do understand what you mean. You can't travel far in America without some message about Jesus assaulting you. Most of the propaganda is benign, but sometimes the message is a real turn off. Do you really think I'm one of them?
No, in fact, you're right, Suzanne. I have been stereotyping you.
Rania was feeling that Muslims were being stereotyped too.
I'm afraid I'll be judged by whether I cover my hair, what I wear, or how I pray. I had been married in a mosque, but it was too conservative for me. I wanted a mosque in which my American family would not feel foreign. I needed a mosque, not only for myself, but for my 4-year-old son. I craved for him a setting similar to Sunday school or Hebrew schools that you have described. One of the problems with Islam in America is that it has become a voice for the disaffected.
If Rania wasn't finding the education in her own tradition, I wondered if my church might be sort of a foster home for her and her children. Her family accepted my invitation to attend services there.
I focused on the beauty of the service, enjoying the God that unites us. Then came Holy Communion. My Muslim understanding of Jesus as human made me feel separated from those who were lining up to take bread.
They just asked non-Christians not to step forward to receive communion.
That moment of communion is always awkward for Jews, too.
Yes, that's when I felt my Muslim identity assert itself.
And what does it mean for you to be Jewish, Priscilla?
It's like a tribal thing.
I've heard that before, but I don't understand.
It's an expression Jews use, M-O-T, member of the tribe.
Oh, so it's loyalty to ancestors.
Yes, and for me, it's primarily to my father. He was the one who insisted we go to temple, and it is there I feel my father's presence in the very best way. Rania, don't you feel that kind of connection to your faith too?
Not at all. My tribe today is the American tribe. Islam allows anyone to become a Muslim simply by saying the testimony of faith. I believe that there is only one God and that Muhammad is his prophet. It has nothing to do with a blood connection. People can come and go from Islam as they please. There is no tradition of baptism or confirmation. It's pretty much between you and God. The God I know through Islam recognizes Jesus, Moses, and the prophets before them.
Christians recognize Jesus, Moses, and the prophets before him.
My issue with Christianity is the concept of the Trinity.
As they continued their discussion, they were not only talking about 3 different religions, but they were also talking about 3 personal and entirely different relationships. At the time, Rania told Priscilla and Suzanne that she often felt that she had faith, but no religion. That Priscilla had religion, but no faith, and that Suzanne had both.
Why are you Christian, Suzanne?
Because I'm a follower of Jesus. He was a better role model than the prophets of the Old Testament and Muhammad. He was the perfect example of love, charity, and humility, unlike Moses and Muhammad, who were both flawed men.
Muhammad made no claims to be perfect. It is specifically Muhammad's accessible humanity, as opposed to Jesus' divinity, that makes him a role model.
Jesus' role on earth was different from Muhammad. If we all behaved the way Jesus did, there would be a lot more peace on earth.
I can see why you admire Jesus so much. But I think that Christianity today is a better religion because it's had time to evolve. It has been the dominant religion in places where there is free speech and civil liberties. That's a huge advantage, especially when you contrast it with Islam, which is predominantly a religion of the developing world.
Where do you find hope, Rania?
Whenever I need affirmation, I look around to the stars and the moon above. Islam seeks to provide evidence in the wonder of nature. It's simply faith in your heart. The Islamic way is to question, consider, think, reflect, and you should come out a believer. I hang on to the idea of God because the alternative seems so futile. I need to believe in a higher order. In fact, the more that science unravels about the wonders of life, the more I am in awe of it. It offers proof of God.
They had discussed the universal God, the Jewish God, the Muslim God, the Christian God. Priscilla had a problem.
Rania, what do I say to people who cite suicide bombers as proof that Islam is a violent religion spread through war?
Nowhere in the Quran does it say, kill and you shall be rewarded. Dying in the name of religion is not unique to Islam. There were also Christian martyrs, some of whom are considered saints. We all should recognize that when religion is used as a rationale for aggression, a tactic of war, or to justify a promised land, then it is politicized religion.
And the word jihad is terrifying to most people. What exactly is jihad?
Well, it can mean inner strength to be a better Muslim. This is considered the greater, more important jihad. The lesser jihad is the idea of holy war in defense of the faith, especially when mortal danger is perceived. This jihad against the infidels, like these terrorist attacks, are not only crazy, but a faulty reading of Islam. By Islam's definition, Christians and Jews are people of the book, and therefore not infidels.
Is suicide accepted in Islam?
No, it's considered a sin, as I believe it is in Judaism and Christianity.
What about the suicide bombers and the virgins awaiting them after their suicides?
It is ridiculous. I've been a Muslim my whole life, and I've never heard about the virgins in heaven until after 9/11.
We felt guilty interrogating her like this, but if I was going to defend her religion, her Muslim God, I needed some facts.
I have always carried a Quran with me, clutching it as I gave birth to my children.
I didn't carry a prayer book.
I didn't carry a Bible.
So you've always had a connection to the Quran?
Yes, but it wasn't until we began our conversations that I've become bold enough to open it and try to read and interpret it on my own.
Suzanne, Rania, how does the Quran inspire you spiritually?
It is very egalitarian and poetic. It strives to be an open book, acceptable to all.
Is it true that you can be a Muslim just by reciting the Shahada and then reading the Quran?
Yes, I think the most important things are the 5 pillars of Islam. They are the Shahada, or the testimony of faith, the daily prayers, charity, fasting, and the pilgrimage. Ultimately, you will be judged on whether you followed these 5 pillars.
Priscilla, without the promise of an afterlife, what do you think makes people want to be good?
I believe that God is inside all of us.
And God is willing to let that part die, and that's fine?
Well, God goes on to the next. We are like flowers that bloom, fade, and go back into the earth again. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. I take hope in what is written in a Jewish prayer book. when we master the violence that fills our world, when we look upon others as we would have them look upon us, when we grant to every person the right we claim for ourselves, that is when redemption will come.
The discussions these women had on every topic, stereotypes, faith, rituals, prayers, death, heaven, and even political issues based on religion, were the gateway to understanding that there is one God equally accessible and available to all. The most important thing they learned was that their religions each had essentially the same message.
The greatest of the commandments is this: to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself.
What is hateful to you, do not do unto others.
None of you is a believer until you love for your neighbor what you love for yourself.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Before we take a break with some coffee and cake and some donuts and cookies and things of that nature that are so good, I would like to ask the three spiritual leaders if they would come up and join us and guide us. If there's any questions and answers that the audience would like, please join us.
It's definitely behind her. I think she put it on the side of her head.
The mic is open.
This is still going.
Does anybody have any questions, concerns, remarks?
Harry?
Yeah.
Try the other one. The bottom. What's the bottom? There you go. He's got it.
Okay, I'm back again. I've learned an awful lot, and I really want to thank the three of you for opening our eyes to so many things. Number one, I know that in the Jewish religion, you have to go through a process to become converted, and it's not the easiest of processes to go through. You have to study, you have to know the prayers, you have to know the history. There's just so many other things. As for Catholicism, I really don't know much about that. And as for being Muslim, I mean, I don't know, anybody just become that religion, or do you also have to go through a process to become, or do you have to be born into it?
You want to start?
Yeah, she's asking.
Well, as a Muslim, We do a testimony of faith. I believe that there is only one God and that Muhammad is his prophet. And then we also believe in all the prophets, because our articles of faith say that